Welcome, Derek Rydall here, founder of the Law of Emergence and author of the best-selling books Emergence and the Abundance Project. And welcome back to this multi-part series. I don't know how many parts yet. The What Matters, or Matter versus What Matters, and this journey of delving into what is the greater nature of reality. And real quick before I get into this, if you want to know more about me, go to derekrydall.com. You can check out my podcast, Emergence, on iTunes and wherever podcasts exist, where there's lots and lots of free training, and also my YouTube channel where you can get, again, lots and lots of free training and videos. So check that out, derekrydall.com. Lots of free trainings, Emergence podcast on iTunes, or my YouTube channel. You can get lots of deep dive free training. But in this series, we're talking about matter versus what matters, because the fundamental underlying problem and of all suffering is the belief that there's a good and a bad, a right and a wrong, and then the way we've polarized. And much of what's going on in our world today, both from religion versus science, the left versus the right, black versus white, gay versus straight, up versus down, capitalist versus socialist. It's all this versus, right? And so it's like it's matter versus what matters. It's God versus mammon. It's what I can see and measure versus believing in what I can't see, and all the things we can make up there. And the problem is that there isn't actually a versus. In a universe, there's only one verse, one song. It's not verses. There may be many lyrics in the one song, but it's one song. And so this is an attempt to delve into that and to understand reality more. And so we're talking today about, and I don't exactly know where this is going to go. It's a conversation I'm in literally every day, if not with my students and clients, definitely with myself. My wife laughs. She'll look out at the pool. I'll be sitting out drinking my morning coffee, and I'll be just talking away. And she'll be like, "Who are you on the phone with?" And I'm like, "Nobody. I'm talking to myself." Or I'll be driving along on a road trip, and suddenly she'll look over and I'm just talking away. She's like, "Who are you talking to?" And I'm talking to you, just be in advance. So I'm thinking deeply and researching deeply and meditating and contemplating deeply on the issues of our times, on science and religion and philosophy and quantum physics and metaphysics and Newtonian physics and all the physics of reality. And what does it mean, and how do we bring greater meaning to it, and how do we understand it so we can live a richer, fuller, freer, more authentic life? So today we're talking about part 3. We're talking about the fatal flaw in atheism. And now I'm probably speaking mostly, if not entirely, to quote unquote the initiated, the converted, the choir, meaning most of you watching or listening probably believe in something beyond the scene. You believe in something spiritual. Maybe you just directly believe in God. Maybe you're a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, whatever, or just spiritual. And so I invite you to invite friends, colleagues, people that disagree with you, that are atheists, that are scientific and overly rational thinking or whatever, or just rational thinkers, to come listen to these and to ask their questions and post their arguments as a way to dig in and further dialogue about the truths here. But the reason why we're talking about atheism is basically a form. It's an archetype. It's an element within ourselves. It's the one that's trying to doubt what is not seen. It's the one that's trying to go against the faith. It's the one that's trying to destroy belief and destroy faith. And then in the world, it's the one that doesn't trust it. It's the one that points out all the flaws in it. It's the one that points out all the flaws in religion and all the flaws in hope and belief and miracles and possibilities. It's that part within ourselves. You understand? Atheist, right? It's against or anti or not believing of theism, of God, of something unseen or invisible, of a greater power than merely what we can see, taste, touch, and measure. It's that part within us. So I want to first put the onus of full responsibility within us. And for the quote unquote believer or the person that's awakened or somewhat been initiated spiritually, we are more identified with the part that believes in what we can't see more than what we can. Whereas the person that's the quote unquote atheist or pure rationalist, which also they would be atheists, many scientists are atheists, materialists, believing only in that which is material, only that which is matter. They still have this other part of them, the spiritual, the believer, the hope, the angel, the divine. But they've, because of circumstance and situation, and also just because of the role they're meant to play, they're more identified with the logical, the left brain, the masculine, the rational. And I'm not making that wrong. It's not wrong. It's two polarities. It's the rational, logical, material, masculine, and the spiritual or irrational or chaos or pure raw creativity, the invisible, the unmanifest, or the divine feminine. These are two parts within us both that have become polarized. But that when working together, like the left and right of politics, and as I said, you cannot fly without a left and a right wing, if they would work together, they would fly. Society would soar if the left and right would recognize they're not on different sides they're not on different teams. They're literally two wings of the same creature, and if they would work and fly together, we would soar. Likewise, science and religion. I think Einstein said one day science and religion will walk hand in hand. Science and religion, atheists and theists, if they would recognize they're actually a part of one whole idea or one organism, and instead of trying to prove each other wrong and annihilate each other, they were using each other's perspectives to continue to activate and refine and develop each other and actually expand the territory of our map of reality. That's the purpose. Different points of view are not to make you wrong and be right and be the winner. It's to test, like science, test your premise, challenge it, so that you get stronger, you begin to let go of elements that prove to not be true or helpful or useful, and actually deepen in what is helpful or useful, and actually ultimately expand. So if you're working with the atheist within you, the doubter, the materialist, nothing that can't be seen is real, or only that which can be seen. If you're working with that part of you or with someone outside of you, you're not supposed to fight for your Christian belief or your Muslim belief or your spiritual belief in order to protect it from being taken away from you. All that shows is that you don't really believe it or don't really know it, which, by the way, is great news. It's great to know what you really don't know, but what you're fighting, protecting, and defending. Because then you can actually begin to discover what you really do know. You can prune away all the dead wood, all the dead branches. Most of our lives is like a tree that looks like it has all these leaves, but then if you go inside the tree, there's like a few branches with leaves, and it's making all the leaves to cover all the other dead branches. But it's sucking all the life out of our tree. And so we got to go in there and begin to prune away, have the courage to look at ourselves, look at our beliefs, look at our point of view, opinions, look at our truths, and let them be challenged as a practice by ourselves or by the outer world, so that we can prune away all that is not growing, all that is not alive, all that is ultimately not helpful, useful, or true. Now, we may only end up with like a little nub of a tree, of a branch. You ever seen a tree that gets pruned back, or a rose bush, and you're like, it's devastating. You're like, oh my God, there's nothing left. What have you done? And then in springtime, it's like, bam, it just blossoms like never before. The same is true and necessary with our own development. Because as we go along, we calcify into beliefs and points of view. And so now, I could make this talk, and maybe I'll do another one, the fatal flaw of spiritual thinkers. And I think we're seeing some of that right now in the world of conspiracy thinking and what's now called conspirituality and Q and the Great Awakening and all the Hollywood people eating babies. It's it's absolutely not. There's so many problems with these theories. It's completely false. But the bigger issue, without even getting into details, is the problem is there's a great lack of real, rational, logical thinking. There's a real lack of self-reflection. There's just a need for a great belief of a great savior, it's the immature and childish side or shadow side to the right brain, to the spiritual path, right? Because it's lacking, it's cut itself off from science, from reason, from rationality, from the other half of you. That's what causes that. That doesn't mean there's not some truths in there. There's lots of truths in there. There are conspiracies, there are bad things going on, but it becomes a crisis and a catastrophe, and it becomes destructive when these two sides of us become separated. Likewise, on the atheist side, the problem with the atheist and the atheistic arguments that are constantly trying to disprove religion is, again, it has nothing to do with trying to discover a greater truth. And there's so many flaws with the premises of the atheists. First of all, to say unequivocally there is no God or there is no higher power or greater intelligence is the most unscientific statement you can make. And some atheists and some scientists would acknowledge they cannot say there isn't. They just cannot prove that there is. That's right, that's fine. But a lot of people are adamantly saying it's not, and they're adamantly against. And what's important to understand is whenever you're adamantly against something, you're adamantly saying this is the truth and you're wrong, you have inadvertently become just as much a fundamentalist as the religious zealots you're fighting against. And so a lot of the atheist movement is a militant fundamentalist movement. It's the same energy, just on the left side, on the rational side. It's the same exact energy as the fundamentalist movements on the religious side or on the right side. You get it? So just as we see that happening with the liberals and the cancel culture, or the right and the fascism, it's the same energies polarizing. And again, all of this exists within you as an individual. It's just playing out. You're not really in the world. The whole world is in you, and your world and your experience of the world is the personifications of your own psyche. And so that's why I want you to see it both in the macro and the micro, and begin to be able to interact with the external craziness of the world as a way to heal and reintegrate yourself. And then ultimately to bring that greater and more integrated self into the world. So that if you're in conversation with somebody that's in that position or that position, instead of you polarizing, you include that position in you because you've looked at yourself, right? If you're in a conversation with an atheist who's arguing against religion and against God, if you've looked at the part of you that argues against there being something greater than you or greater than the world or hope or possibility, then you're going to be able to include that and actually have the possibility of that conversation being a conversation that converts. It creates a conversion. There's an alchemy that allows for a greater realization for both parties, that allows the territory or map of reality to expand for both parties, and eventually for the whole conversation in the collective. And so let me just talk about a few of the fallacies, or the reason why atheism, as it mostly appears, and not always, there's lots of, and by the way, lots of atheists are great, wonderful people. They care about people. And what's really happening is they're fighting against an old, dogmatic, and very childish perspective of religion. It's not a worthy argument to argue that God is not a man with a beard on a cloud somewhere. That's not a worthy argument. If you're an atheist, or if you're arguing that, or if anybody's arguing that, it's a waste of time, because there's so much evolution that's happened in the conversation, but you'll still see that go on, and they'll think they've won something by proving, or by trying to point out that this fundamentalist religious person believing God is a man on a cloud is crazy. That's true. They are thinking like a child. That's the Santa Claus and Easter Bunny kind of thinking. So, but the real spiritual understanding of the cosmology has evolved far beyond that. So that's one of the arguments you'll hear atheists argue about. The other reason atheists are arguing against religion is because of all the damage religion has done. Because of, in the name of God, hurting or killing gays, hurting women, repressing women, all the racism and misogyny and just the terrible, terrible stuff that has seemingly come out of religious orders, or the terrorism and all of that, which all religions go through most of those phases, is what I like to say is throwing the baby Jesus out with the holy bathwater. Again, there's nothing to argue. There's some misinterpretations and misunderstandings of religious teachings that then leads to some bad code in the human operating system, right? And the racism and the bigotry and the white supremacy and all these different things. But again, if you're an atheist that's a rationalist or a scientist, your ultimate aim, should be to have a greater understanding of what's really going on here, and to expand the map of reality rather than merely to prove your point of view. And so we can absolutely agree that there's some damaging and destructive elements to religion, but we can make the same case for science. Science has also killed a lot of people through all the weapons of mass destruction and technologies, and science in its early evolution made all kinds of mistakes and continues to make mistakes. Science in the form of medicine kills, and I could be way underestimating this, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 people a year in malpractice, medical malpractice, bad science, bad pharmaceuticals. Science kills a lot of people, but we don't throw science out. We don't say science is bad. Religion, it's just human beings are operating it. Relative and somewhat immature and distorted and dysfunctional minds are trying to apply the scientific method and create scientific objects and technologies, and we screw up a lot of times. Likewise with religion. So again, it's an argument that is specious, that is a straw man argument that doesn't really get, again, to the heart of it. And again, I want you to look at this as a worldview, and I want you to also look at it in terms of the way you hold these different polarities in yourself. You might be on one side or the other. As I said, you might not even have any rationality to you, and that's causing you a lot of problems. You might be overly rational, overly controlling, and that's causing you a lot of problems with embracing the unknown and the mystery and the invisible within yourself. You're more of an atheist than you know, right? An atheist is fundamentally a person that doesn't believe in the invisible, that doesn't operate as if they have an invisible source, as if they're supported and buoyed up by something beyond merely the material, beyond merely what's measurable. That's an atheist, fundamentally. They wouldn't necessarily call themselves that. So if you operate to that extent, or to whatever extent you only believe you have abundance if you have money in your account, that's atheistic. If you only believe you have the potential of full health and vitality if your body's working well, that's atheistic. If you only believe that peace is a fundamental nature of humanity when there's not war and conflict, that's atheistic. In other words, if you are believing more in what you do see than what you don't see, that's atheistic. If you're believing more in what you don't see than what you do see, that's more on the side of the spiritual, on the right brain. If you only believe in the invisible and in that which you don't see, in other words, if you're living in a fantasy, that's a fundamentalist point of view. That's conspirituality on the brink of that. That's a recipe for disaster. If you only believe in what you do see and what you can measure, that's dogmatic atheism and rationalism and stuck in the left brain and cutting yourself off from life itself. And that's also going to create destructive and unsustainable structures in your life and in the world. So both, you see what I'm saying? That's happening within you. So what are some of the other fallacies or false arguments that a lot of the atheists or rationalists make about spirituality or religion, or the fact that there could be an invisible intelligence, at least invisible to our current instruments? they'll argue that, um, again, they'll just argue against religion and its destructive nature and the ignorance and the idea that people believe that, Jesus was born from a virgin and was literally crucified or literally rose from the dead. And they can make a good argument against that by showing that predating Jesus, there are many, many of the exact same stories of virgin births, crucifixions, and resurrections. So it's very possible that didn't actually occur that way. Now, again, to the fundamentalist, to the religious, that's going to be very threatening. Don't take away my Jesus. Don't take away my Messiah. But again, if we're going to also include rationalism and logic and embrace what can be known, we have to acknowledge that that's a fact. But it doesn't take away what matters most. What atheists don't do, where they fail to be scientific in any way, is to actually go, there are all these great religions, in philosophies, from Buddhism to Taoism to Christianity and Judaism, and all these things, and across cultures, across countries, across time. When you strip away the dogma and the doctrine and many of the cultural idioms, what you find are universal building blocks, universal truths or principles or ideas. And what a scientist is looking for in nature is, where is the universal? Where is a principle that applies across the board? Well, there are principles and ideas that are across all great religions and philosophies. And if the believer in the scientific and the rationalist could get together and begin to actually now have a conversation and a debate about what within all the great religions matches, what within all the great religions is consistent, and then begin to now make a case for those initial revelations and insights. How can we actually trace the evolution of humanity and human consciousness from that point? And then you can see from the evolution of these insights to the beginning of rights for women, and eventually for children, and eventually into a more of a formal society, the Ten Commandments, Moses, the freedom of slavery, and democracy. You can begin to see evolving out of these great insights that did not come merely through evolution, as we know it anyway, or through science as we know it. They came directly from a revelation, from a deep insight that an individual had, that was then applied across cultures, countries, and millennia. And we can track and match evolution of human consciousness with that. We can also begin to track the devolution of consciousness. We can track how we split off from that deep wisdom in the Enlightenment and became more obsessed with science and technology and matter and materialism, which was valuable because we learned to master matter, but we began to separate from what matters. And we are now in a state where in order to not blow ourselves up or destroy ourselves, and in order to evolve to the next level, instead of being science fiction, where you see all of this high tech, but human beings are worse off than ever. It's always post-apocalyptic. It's always, human beings are terrible, other than a few Jedis, but there's all this great technology. That's one possible future. The other one is where what matters and matter, deep connection and understanding of this deep ancient wisdom, and that there is a greater intelligence and a greater template for living that has been emerging for millennia. That's the right brain, that's the soul, the spirit, the feminine, integrated with the masculine, the science, the reason, the rationality, the quote unquote atheistic thinking. When those are married, matter, the mastery over matter, and the mastery over what matters as one. That's what is trying to emerge in our world now. And we have to take responsibility for where we polarize on one side or the other, where we fall into a liberal positioning, cancel culture. We don't want to see any of the facts. We just want to say that Black Lives Matter and all black people are victims and all white people are victimizers and everything's racist or anti-racist. That's neither consciously spiritual or consciously rational. We've fallen off a cliff. Likewise, that it's destroy, take everything for ourselves, every man for himself, Ayn Rand, Fountainhead, capitalism run amok, corporatist, oligarchy, country, blah, 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 fascism. So we don't need to polarize to either side. And we don't need to fight against fascism or fight against conspirituality. We need to recognize that there's something on both sides that is really connected to a creature in the middle. It's the two wings of the bird. There's a truth in the middle. Our opportunity is to see where we get caught in either side, where we judge either side as right or wrong, and instead begin to discern where's the truth that's emerging. Where do we need to embrace our own shadows, and where do we need to get out of arguing against something and becoming an ever-increasing stand for what's emerging in us and in the world. And then now we're looking, it's like, where's Waldo, right? We're listening for and looking for the nuggets of truth rather than looking for something to fight against and be triggered by and be frustrated and angry at and be hurt by and all of that. We're looking for what's true, for what's emerging. We become scientists of the heart and the mind and the soul. We be like gorillas in the mist. We're watching. We're becoming beholders of what's really unfolding. So that's my invitation to you. That's the purpose of this whole series. Again, if you want to learn more, dive deeper into various of my teachings and trainings, go check out my podcast on Emergence on iTunes called Emergence, or on YouTube, all my many video trainings and talks. You can also go to DerekRydall.com and go to the free trainings, get all kinds of cool free trainings and stuff. And I hope this is interesting. Share it with friends and colleagues and people that may disagree so we can enter into a dialogue, into a conscious conversation that converts into a more expanded understanding of ultimate reality. Until next time, remember to live authentically, love unconditionally, and follow your destiny. Make sure to comment below. Let me know what you think. I'll talk to y'all soon.